My name is Jason Schuster. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I own Intricate Art Spine and Body Solutions. It's a continuing education company teaching other doctors how to do a couple things to help improve the health of their patients and the health of the population in general. Today we're going to talk about hydrogen-rich water, which is deuterium water, how it helps metabolic health, and how it improves mitochondrial health, and how it improves your overall health in general. And at the end of this video, you guys, there's a free access code to the first of 5 board-certified nutrition courses that we have on our website. It's a great course. Check that out. You guys will enjoy it. Hydrogen-rich water to treat metabolic syndrome. So hydrogen-rich water, and this is a little complicated to think about if you haven't thought about this stuff before, but instead of H2O, right, so 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen, you can think about it as deuterium water. So deuterium is a different form of hydrogen, right? It's a heavier form of hydrogen. So instead of H2O, you can think about it as D2O. Clinical trials have shown that drinking heavy hydrogen water or hydrogen-rich water really helps alleviate mitochondrial dysfunction. So mitochondrial dysfunction is one of the things that we've talked about throughout this course, the first nutrition course, the introduction course, the peptide therapy class. Having healthy mitochondria is one of the most base elements that we need to have if we are going to be healthy both mentally and physically. If the mitochondria aren't functioning properly, we basically have 0 chance of being optimally healthy mentally or physically. So the mitochondria are extremely important. If those aren't functioning, we're not producing our ATP normally, our body doesn't have enough energy, and we just can't do anything normally, right? So heavy hydrogen water improves mitochondrial function. And again, this is one of those things, our body breaks it down very, very quickly into just different forms of hydrogen. So I've never read anything about serious adverse safety signals with this stuff, you guys, just FYI. So molecular hydrogen has also been shown to reduce oxidative stress, just like NMN does, and resveratrol, and improve cellular function, reduces chronic inflammation, right? So all of these things are things that we've talked about with the other supplements and vitamins and peptides. Heavy hydrogen water also does this, right? It helps with RNA expression, cellular cleanup, autophagy, and overall it just promotes improved metabolic homeostasis, autonomic nervous system homeostasis, mitochondrial homeostasis. It improves DNA expression. It seems to help with all aspects of health because it's working on one of the most basic essential parts of our health, which is our mitochondria. So again, if so much of the United States population is obese or overweight or morbidly obese, about 80%, right? This one study here that I've included, 78.9%. One of the other studies that I've included was 79.4%. Some say even more than that. But I keep using this statistic because that statistic guarantees you that all of those people have dysfunctional mitochondria. You can't have properly functioning mitochondria if you don't exercise and you're overweight, which is the vast majority of those people, right? So if they're in that condition, right, one of the things that we can do to help is help improve their mitochondrial function to the maximum potential while we try to help them change their lifestyle and get healthier in that way. But there's some immediate things that we can do to improve their health, like taking supplements that improve mitochondrial function regardless of the situation that you're in, right? So for whatever position that you're in, if you have cancer, if you have a surgical injury, if you just have broke your leg or something like that, improving mitochondrial function is going to optimize your healing and improve your outcome. So metabolic syndrome, you guys, that's one of the things that's most heavily spoken about with hydrogen-rich water. So metabolic syndrome is observed in patients with obesity, hyperglycemia, insulin resistance, fibromyalgia, just chronic sympathetic autonomic hyperactivity, hypertension, right? It's associated with all sorts of problems with oxidation reduction reactions, chronic inflammation, and it disrupts both extracellular and intracellular homeostasis. So hydrogen has 3 known isotopes. So the mass 1 isotope, the one that everybody sees on the elemental table, that's the one that is the most common. Over 99% of all hydrogen in the universe is that isotope as far as we understand, at least here in our atmosphere, right? So there's a heavy hydrogen isotope, and that's the one that makes heavy hydrogen water. It's deuterium, right? So it's double the mass of regular hydrogen. So instead of H, or instead of one mass, it has two masses, right? So it has one proton and one neutron. Way less common than typical hydrogen, less than 0.01%, but we can make it with simple machines right now. And they're not that expensive, you guys. And then there's another form called tritium. That's a mass 3 isotope, right? So regular hydrogen, mass 1, deuterium, mass 2, tritium, mass 3. It seems like making deuterium water is the most beneficial thing that people have discovered so far, right? So metabolic syndrome, you guys, an easy way to think about that is just chronic sympathetic autonomic hyperactivity. Your body is chronically turned way on high, which requires a constant supply of ATP. So it's requiring our mitochondria to work overtime. It requires more base elements like NAD+. So when we run out of that stuff, our mitochondria can't produce enough energy anymore. And then that is one of the things that causes metabolic syndrome, cancer, autoimmune diseases, and all that stuff, right? So in the absence of oxygen, mitochondria produce 18 times less ATPs, right? So with oxygen, mitochondria and the Krebs cycle produce about 36 ATPs. Without oxygen, it only produces about 2. So that's an 18 times increase just with the difference between having oxygen and not having oxygen. And one of the things that hydrogen heavy water does is it helps increase oxygen saturation of the mitochondria inside the nucleus, right? So that's very, very important aspect of what hydrogen rich water does. It's actually providing nutrients to the mitochondria themselves inside the nuclei of our cells, which is allowing like our base powerhouse of stuff, or the diesel generator, however you want to think about it. That's giving it more energy to give the rest of our body more energy. So remember, you guys, typically when the human body finally presents with symptoms, something has been going on for a long time. The easiest way to think about this is with cancer. Most humans wouldn't know they had cancer until it was about stage 4, unless we had yearly checkups, or if you're a medical person and you know the initial signs to look for, which may not be obvious to everybody. So a lot of people don't realize they have cancer until it's too late, and that's because our body has an amazing ability to deal with stuff and to mask problems until it just absolutely can't do it anymore. And one of the ways I think about that is once the mitochondria lose the ability to produce enough ATPs to manage what they need to, that's when we hit like rock bottom and things start to go really, really wrong. So doing simple things like drinking heavy hydrogen water, nutrition, supplementation, peptide therapy, exercise, all of these things help decrease the likelihood that these long-term problems are going to continue. And again, chronic inflammation is one of the ones that causes so many problems. And helping the mitochondria function better decreases inflammation. Hydrogen heavy water does this, right? So this helps with heart problems. It helps with muscle function. There's some animal trials that have been showing that hydrogen-rich water prevented the development of atherosclerosis, drug-induced cardiac hypertrophy, and dysfunction. So this is one of the leading causes of death worldwide, and they can show in animal trials at least that supplementing with hydrogen heavy water or deuterium water significantly decreases the risk of some of the leading causes of death in the United States and in the world. So here's a good slide on just kind of what it's doing with the mitochondria, you guys. So the NRF2 pathway is listed in there. The KEAP1 pathway, that's another anti-inflammatory pathway that's involved with NRF2. So we got H2O2 or deuterium water, and then there's hydroxide ions. It helps with limiting reactive oxygen species. It helps with maintaining pH of everything, which we just spoke about. It's really, really important, right? So NMN, resveratrol, omega-3s, all of them help the mitochondria function better along with doing other stuff. So does heavy hydrogen water. So there's a common theme behind all of these classes, you guys, and improving mitochondrial function is one of the most important basic things that we need to do to keep ourselves healthy. Here's another diagram, oxidative stress, some of the main, some of the same pathways in there, right? So mitochondrial dysfunction, again, if the mitochondrial dysfunction, the NRF2 pathway dysfunctions. If the NRF2 pathway dysfunctions, that's one of the mitochondria's main ways to decrease inflammation, right? And that is because a certain gene or a certain set of genes aren't being expressed enough to produce enough proteins to drive the NRF2 pathway. By drinking deuterium water, it seems to maximize the mitochondria's health and energy and ability to do all the stuff that they need to do. Another thing that's talked a lot about with deuterium water is free radicals, right? So mitochondria, just like our regular cells, have a membrane structure around them, right? They have a double membrane structure, and free radicals will disrupt that membrane structure and allow different molecules to start crossing over the boundary, right? Like if you leaky gut syndrome or blood-brain barrier leaking, that's the same type of thing that's going on. So we need our membranes to be properly functional of the mitochondria themselves and our cells for proteins to get in and out, and the proteins are the things that actually do stuff, right? So if those membranes aren't functioning properly, we're not going to have proper antioxidation. We're going to have a lot of garbage inside the cells. The mitochondria are going to have to work harder. They're going to run out of energy, and it's going to be a big problem, right? So again, we don't understand all the individual reactions in almost anything in medicine. We do have the ability to see the cause and effect. So we do know that drinking deuterium water is safe and effective. What we don't know is exactly how it's working, right? So I think that's kind of interesting, but we still don't know exactly how things are getting donated and changed in the reactions between deuterium and hydroxide ions and hydroxide productions, right? So one of the ways that the free radical hydroxide, OH- is generated is by the Haber-Weiss reaction, right? So O2 plus deuterium water goes to O2 plus OH plus OH-, right? Because deuterium water is H2O2. So that's just one of the ways that it happens. That's not important to understand, but that's one of the mechanisms by which scientists are looking at how deuterium water is helping to regulate the mitochondria themselves, right? So that has the hydroxide ions have a strong potential to change the pH of solution, just like hydrogen ions do, right? So it seems to be one of the mechanisms by which heavy hydrogen water, deuterium water, works, is it helps maintain optimal pH inside the cell. It helps with antioxidation, it helps with free radicals, inflammation, all that stuff. As far as mitochondrial nutrition for mitochondria themselves, so we need to think about feeding our mitochondria just like we think about feeding ourselves, right? So this concept has been around for about 20 years. Again, it takes about 20 to 30 years on average for new things to get into medical school. So this is not something that anybody's ever heard about, and it probably won't be taught in schools ever because we just won't get into that. But in 2005, the concept of mitochondrial nutrient was proposed, right? So just like we need nutrients, our mitochondria themselves need nutrients. So the mitochondrial nutrient mechanisms of action, there's 4 in this paper here, right? So protecting mitochondrial enzymes and or stimulating enzyme activity, that's number 1. Number 2, inducing activation of endogenous antioxidant systems to enhance antioxidant defense. Number 3, preventing mitochondria from producing reactive oxygen species and removing reactive oxygen species in mitochondria. And number 4, protecting and repairing mitochondrial damage, right? So they'll go in, and LPSs, you guys, are one thing that you hear about to make sure that they're not in any medications you take, and they are intentionally put in all vaccines, by the way, lipopolysaccharides. So just FYI. But if you put lipopolysaccharides in mice, it damages their lung. And if you treat the lung with heavy hydrogen and rich saline, it really improves mitochondrial function and reduces swelling, and it improves the ability of the mitochondria to produce ATP, right? So one of the things that is very damaging in a lot of processed foods and other substances is lipopolysaccharides, and that damages tissues, right? Again, those are put in almost every vaccine, just FYI. In a high-fat, diet-induced liver injury model in mice, so they give mice a abnormally high ratio of bad fat in their diet. A high-fat diet, you guys, is not bad in and of itself. It depends on what ratio you're eating fat to other stuff and what you're doing with it. But this is one way that they can induce liver injuries in mice, right? So they do a high-fat diet, they treat it with molecular H2, and it improves glucose metabolism, lipid metabolism. It helps hepatic mitochondria, restores normal protein expression, which means that it's restoring the normal way that the genes are being expressed, and it helps activate homeostatic enzymes. So all of this stuff is very, very healthy and healing. Again, I have not read anything specific about any serious adverse things to think about as far as the mitochondria go and heavy hydrogen water, right? So by protecting the mitochondria, we are protecting the cells against aging. That's one way that we can think about it, right? So by normalizing and regulating oxidation reduction, we are going to help normalize the NAD plus conversion to NADH, which provides the electrons for the mitochondria to produce ATP, right? So again, all of these things are helping the mitochondria in some way, shape, or form, which helps everything else in our body, right? Mitochondria will produce reactive oxygen species themselves, and then those reactive oxygen species can have some type of a negative effect on the mitochondria if the reactive oxygen species can't be gobbled up or ionized or changed in some way, shape, or form like they normally would be, right? So having hydrogen heavy water, by using that as a supplement, it helps your mitochondria themselves clean up a lot of that stuff. Just like with the omega-3s and the NMN and a lot of those things, it talks about the NRF2 pathway. A different form of the NRF2 pathway is the KEEP1 NRF2 anti-inflammatory pathway, just a different way that people name it. But again, deuterium water helps with the NRF2 pathway, which helps with mitochondrial health, it helps with cellular health, and it just helps with our overall health. All right, you guys, so pH, percent hydrogen. This is a really, really interesting one, and it's a very, very easy thing for people to do. There's a bunch of different little machines out there that you can buy that will make heavy hydrogen water for you. So let's just go through what pH is first. I know most people understand this to some degree or other, but I think a lot of people don't understand the details, and it's important to understand the details before you understand why heavy hydrogen water is helpful for a lot of things, right? So percent hydrogen is based on a log scale. So that means that a pH of 2 has 10 times a 10 times higher concentration of hydrogen ions than a pH of 3, right? So a pH of 1 is more acidic than a pH of 2. A pH of 7 is neutral. 14 is the most basic. 0 is the most acidic, right? So as you go from 7 down, you're going into acid, and each decreased number has 10 times less hydrogen ion concentration than the number above it, right? So 3 has 10 times less than 4, etc. And the same thing goes as you go in the positive direction, right? So pure water has a pH of 7, which means there's an equal number of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, right? So OH minus and H plus, that's pure water. That is equal amounts of hydroxide and hydrogen ions, right? That's what H2O is. That is used as the base for what is acid, or that's used as the central measure for measuring what is acidic or basic, right? So typical blood has a very, very tiny range of pH that it can function in properly. So it's only a typical blood, you guys, from 7.35 to 7.45 is the range, right? So it's only a range of 0.1 that we can properly function in most of the times. 7.35 to 7.45, that's only 1/10, right? So that's a very small range that our blood has to be regulating itself into for proper enzyme function and all this other stuff, which is really, really amazing. So you think about the fact that we can eat a bunch of basic stuff or drink a bunch of acidic stuff, and our body maintains our blood pH within 1/10 within 1/10, right? Within 7.35 to 7.45. It's really, really amazing. So if we don't have proper pH basically everything goes wrong. Nothing can function properly if we don't have the proper pH throughout different systems in our body, right? So the easiest one to talk about is blood. Some of the other organ systems have slightly different pHs just based on what they're doing at the certain time and what your health is and all this other stuff, right? So one thing to keep in mind is that all substances that contain hydrogen are not necessarily acidic, right? So the hydrogen ions need to be bonded to their connecting atoms in a way that they can easily break off and be donated, right? So hydrogen bonds are weak bonds compared to covalent bonds. So things like methane or CH4, which has covalent bonds, those are strong bonds, and the hydrogens don't easily get donated, so it's not an acid, right? So things are acidic if they can readily donate hydrogen ions to something, and things are basic if they readily donate hydroxide ions to something. That's another way to think about it. So we talked about the very small range to maintain homeostasis as far as blood pH goes. The average is 7.4. It just so happens that this is probably just an evolutionary process over millions of years, that at a pH of 7.4, most of the stuff in our body can function at an optimal level, or most of the molecular or biochemical reactions can function at an optimal level. So there's something that happens in a totally neutral solution where a lot of intermediate biochemicals or molecules in things like the NRF2 pathway, they get ionized, or their molecular structure changes if they're in a totally neutral pH. So for whatever reason, and we could get way into the chemistry of this, but it's not necessary, at a pH of about 7.4, most of the reactions in our body seem to do the best, or go the best, right? So humans need to have oxygen in our system. There's some microbes and stuff that are anaerobic, but humans are an aerobic system in general. There's some anaerobic parts, obviously, but one of the byproducts of respiration is carbon dioxide, right? So the more carbon dioxide that we have in our body, the more acidic things are going to get. And that is one of the things that you see when people start to hyperventilate. One of the problems is that is changing the pH of our internal systems, which is going to cause very, very rapidly all sorts of issues, right? So the two most important systems in humans, at least, for maintaining pH is our lungs and our renal system, right? So the pulmonary system adjusts pH with expelling or containing more carbon dioxide or maintaining more carbon dioxide, right? So when we inhale, we're breathing in oxygen and nitrogen and other stuff. And then when we exhale, one of the things we're exhaling is carbon dioxide, right? So the more carbon dioxide that we exhale, the more we can change our blood pH in one direction, and the more oxygen we inhale and the less carbon dioxide we exhale, the more we can change the pH in the other direction. So one of the things that proteins do, you guys, is they carry lipophilic substances, or stuff that likes fat, right? That attaches to fat throughout our body, because most of our body is water, or lipophobic, right? Hydrophilic. So one of the things that proteins do is they carry fats throughout our body and transport them to certain areas, right? Like omega-3s. If our pH is out of balance, that can't happen optimally, and a whole bunch of stuff goes wrong. So just another reason why proper pH is so important, and the pH of the mitochondria is extremely important for proper mitochondrial function.